It was a quiet day on the farm, the kind where everything felt calm and steady. The sun was shining, casting long shadows across the rows of crops. The land had been his life for as long as he could remember, and there was something comforting about the familiar routine. But as he moved from one field to the next, something began to feel off. The wind picked up in an unusual way, swirling around him like it was trying to tell him something. At first, he dismissed it. After all, he'd seen storms come and go countless times. The weather was something you couldn't predict, no matter how long you'd been working the land. But this time, something in the air made him pause. The sky had shifted to a strange shade of gray, and the wind now felt like it was carrying more than just dust. The temperature had dropped too, and the hum of the tractor beneath him didn't seem as comforting anymore. It was almost like the land itself was holding its breath. He glanced up at the sky, squinting through the haze, and there it was, clouds rolling in fast, thick and heavy like a wall. It was the kind of storm that came out of nowhere, the kind that left you scrambling for cover. The farmer's heart rate quickened. He had seen many storms in his time, but this one felt different, like it was moving with purpose. He knew he had little time to get back to the barn and secure everything. His truck wasn't far away, parked near the barn where he kept the tools and supplies, so he hopped into it quickly, revving the engine and kicking up gravel as he sped toward the shelter. The wind howled louder now, and the first heavy drops of rain began to slap against the windshield, blurring his vision. The rain came down in sheets, relentless and fast, as if the heavens themselves had opened up in fury. He could barely see the road in front of him as he skidded along, his hands gripping the steering. When he reached the barn, he immediately went to work securing the doors, making sure everything was locked down tight. He had learned the hard way over the years that a storm like this could cause a lot of damage if you weren't careful. It wasn't the first time he'd seen winds strong enough to tear through buildings and fields. He wasn't about to let that happen again. But as he was finishing up, his radio crackled to life, breaking the quiet hum of the storm. The voice on the other end was frantic, a woman's voice trembling with fear. She was stranded, she said. She had been driving when the storm hit. Her car had broken down somewhere out on the back roads far from any shelter. The line was cutting in and out, and the desperation in her voice was unmistakable. "Please, can you help me? I don't know what to do. I can't see anything and I'm scared," she said. The farmer hesitated for a moment. It wasn't like him to leave the safety of his farm during a storm. The rain was coming down harder now, and the wind had picked up even more. But something about her voice, how raw and fearful it was, made him think twice. He knew the area well enough to understand just how dangerous the back roads could be when a storm like this hit. If she didn't have the right tools or knowledge to survive, things could get bad quickly. He sighed, grabbing his jacket off the hook and pulling it on over his clothes. There was no question in his mind now. He had to go. He didn't know who this woman was, and he didn't know what kind of trouble she might be in, but he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. He threw the keys into the ignition and started the truck, revving it as he backed out of the barn. The road was slick with rain, and every mile felt like it took twice as long as it should have. The headlights of his truck barely cut through the storm, making it difficult to see where the road was leading. He could feel the tension in his muscles, the way his hands gripped the wheel a little too tightly. But he pressed on. The radio crackled again as the woman's voice came through, clearer now but still full of panic. "I'm not sure where I am anymore. There's no one around and my phone's about to die. Please, hurry." The farmer knew he didn't have much time. He pushed the truck harder, navigating through the storm with all the experience he'd gained from years of working the land. Eventually, he spotted a small battered car up ahead. It was abandoned on the side of the road, its engine hood up and steam rising from it. The woman wasn't inside, but she was standing just a few feet away, holding herself steady against the wind. She looked up when the farmer pulled up beside her, and for a moment, they just stared at each other through the windshield. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way she was trembling not just from the cold but from something else, something deeper. Without waiting for her to ask, the farmer unlocked the door and motioned for her to get in. "Get in. It's not safe out here," he said, his voice calm but firm. She didn't hesitate. She scrambled into the passenger seat, her hands shaking as she closed the door behind her. The farmer didn't waste any time. He slammed the truck into gear and turned the vehicle around, heading back in the direction of the barn. "I thought I was going to die out there," the woman said softly after a long pause. Her voice was barely audible over the storm. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come. The farmer nodded, focusing on the road. Don't mention it. I'm just glad I was in the right place at the right time. For the rest of the ride, the woman remained silent, watching the rain streak across the windshield. Her eyes were distant, lost in thoughts the farmer couldn't understand. He didn't press her for details. Sometimes it was best to let people keep their stories to themselves, especially when they had been through something so frightening. When they finally reached the town, the woman thanked him again before stepping out of the truck. She gave him a quick smile, though it was tinged with sadness. I don't know how to repay you, she said. The farmer gave her a simple nod. Just take care of yourself. That's all anyone can ask. And with that, she disappeared into the storm, leaving the farmer to wonder if he would ever see her again. As he drove back to the farm, his thoughts were already shifting to the next task at hand. But there was something about the encounter that stuck with him. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the woman's look of gratitude. Or maybe it was the fact that in a world that often seemed too chaotic to understand, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could make a difference. Little did he know, his decision to help a stranger would soon lead to something much bigger, something far beyond the storm and the farm he knew so well. A twist of fate was just beginning to unfold, and the farmer's life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The morning after the storm, the farmer woke up to a sky that was deceptively clear. The clouds had disappeared, leaving behind nothing but a deep blue expanse. The air felt fresh, almost too fresh, as if the storm had scrubbed the world clean. The birds were back, singing their songs, and the fields were calm again. But despite the peace surrounding him, the farmer couldn't shake the memory of the night before. He kept thinking about the woman he had rescued, her voice still echoing in his mind. Her fear had been real, palpable. He couldn't help but wonder what had caused her to be out there alone, stranded, in the middle of such a violent storm. It had been a simple act of kindness, just a quick decision to help a stranger, but it had left him with more questions than answers. Who was she? What had she been doing on those back roads all alone in such a bad storm? Why hadn't she called for help before? The thoughts swirled in his mind as he ate his breakfast, but he tried to push them aside. He had work to do and the farm needed his attention. The morning passed slowly. He went about his usual routine, checking on the animals, making sure the crops were still healthy, and preparing his equipment for another day in the fields. But there was a lingering sense that something wasn't quite right. His phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a number he didn't recognize. For a moment he thought about ignoring it, but then he remembered the woman from the day before. He had given her his number in case she needed anything. Maybe she was calling to thank him again. Hello? He answered, trying to sound casual. A deep voice came through the speaker, one that sounded official, like someone used to giving orders. Is this the farmer who helped a woman stranded in the storm last night? The voice asked. The farmer felt a chill run down his spine. Yes, that was me. Is everything all right? He asked, his mind racing. Was this about the woman? Was she in trouble? We need to talk, the voice continued. I'm with the military. You may have unknowingly assisted someone who is part of an operation that we've been monitoring. I need to know everything you remember about last night. The farmer's heart skipped a beat. The last thing he expected was to be talking to someone from the military. His first instinct was to hang up and go back to his normal life. But something told him he needed to hear this out. I didn't know anything about that. I just helped a woman who was stranded, he replied, his voice steady. I didn't ask questions. I just gave her a ride. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before the voice responded. She's not who you think she is. We believe she's been involved in something much bigger than just a stranded motorist. You've gotten involved in something you don't fully understand, and we need to know if she said anything to you. The farmer was speechless. He had never been involved in anything like this before. He had no idea who the woman really was, and he hadn't pressed her for details. He hadn't even asked her name. All he had done was help someone in need. But now, it seemed like that simple decision had placed him in the middle of something far more complicated than he could have imagined. She didn't say much, the farmer finally admitted. She was just scared and cold. She didn't seem to want to talk about anything other than getting out of the storm. The voice on the other end sighed. We need to find her, and we need to understand why she was in that storm. She's been involved in some sensitive matters, and we need to make sure no one else gets caught up in this. If you see her again, contact us immediately. Do you understand?" The farmer nodded, though the person on the other end couldn't see it. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet. He hung up the phone, his mind swirling with confusion. He hadn't expected any of this. He had simply tried to help someone. But now it seemed that his good deed had pulled him into something far beyond his control. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The farmer went back to his work, but his mind kept drifting back to the conversation. The woman, a part of some operation? It didn't make sense. She had looked so ordinary, so vulnerable. He kept replaying her face in his mind, wondering if he had missed something important. Had she been acting strangely? Had there been any signs that she wasn't who she seemed to be? By the time the sun began to set, the farmer was more restless than ever. He had to get back to the fields to finish his work, but the questions kept growing, gnawing at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen, that this wasn't over. It wasn't until he was back in his truck, heading toward the fields, that he saw something strange in the sky. A dark shape moving quickly and low, cutting through the air. It wasn't a bird and it wasn't a commercial plane. It was a jet, and it was moving too fast to be anything ordinary. The farmer's stomach dropped as he realized what it was. An F-22 fighter jet, its sleek, sharp shape unmistakable. He pulled over, watching in awe as the jet soared overhead. His heart pounded in his chest. What was a military jet doing in this area, and why was it flying so low? The farmer watched as the jet changed direction, moving towards his farm. It wasn't just passing through. It was heading right for him. The jet disappeared behind the trees for a moment, but then he saw it again coming back into view. It was too close now. His hands clenched around the steering wheel, his mind racing. Was this connected to the woman? Was the military looking for her, and had they followed him here? The jet banked sharply, and for a moment he thought it might land on the road ahead. He didn't know what to do. He could barely comprehend what was happening. His heart was pounding in his ears, and everything felt like it was moving too fast. The jet passed again, its engines roaring above him, and he felt a wave of unease settle in his chest. Was this the start of something bigger? Was his life about to change forever because of one simple act of kindness? Before he could make sense of it, the jet disappeared into the distance, leaving only the fading sound of its engines behind. The farmer was left in stunned silence. He had no idea what he had just witnessed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the last time he'd see that jet, or the woman. The days that followed felt strangely quiet, as if the world had slowed down just for him. The farmer went about his usual routine, tending to the crops and animals, but his mind kept drifting back to the events of the past few days. The storm, the woman, and then the fighter jet. It was all too strange to ignore. Something about it didn't sit right, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. He kept telling himself that he was overthinking things. After all, he had done nothing more than help a stranger in need. He didn't know who she was, and he hadn't asked. But now, with the military getting involved and the appearance of the F-22, it was hard not to wonder if there was more to it than that. Had he unknowingly become part of something much bigger than he could understand? The farmer tried to push the thoughts aside as he went about his work, but his curiosity kept gnawing at him. What had the woman been doing out there, stranded on the side of the road in the middle of that storm? Why had the military been so interested in her, and why had they reached out to him? His gut told him there was something he was missing, something important. It wasn't long before he received another call, this time from a different voice, a woman's voice. "I understand you were the one who helped a woman in a storm a few days ago," she said, her tone calm but firm. "My name is Agent Davis. I'm with the government, and I need to ask you a few questions." The farmer's heart skipped a beat. Another call? This time from someone else in the government? He had a bad feeling about all of this, but he kept his voice steady as he responded. "What's this about?" "I already told them everything I knew." "This is important," she said. "I know you don't know everything, but we need you to be honest with us. You've become involved in something much bigger than just helping a stranded motorist. That woman you helped is part of a larger operation, and we need to track her down. We think she might be in danger, and we need your help to find her." The farmer was silent for a moment, trying to absorb what he was hearing. The woman wasn't just a random stranger. She was part of some larger operation. He thought back to their brief encounter. She hadn't seemed like anything out of the ordinary. But now it seemed like he had unknowingly stumbled into something far more complicated than he could have imagined. "Look," I don't know what's going on, the farmer said finally, his voice tinged with frustration. I helped her because she needed help. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even know who she was. Agent Davis's voice softened, almost apologetic. I understand that. But what you don't know is that her actions have been under scrutiny for a while now. She's been involved in a very sensitive situation, and her presence here has raised a lot of questions. We think she's trying to disappear, but she won't be able to do that for long. The farmer's head was spinning. What had he gotten himself into? He had no idea what kind of situation the woman had been involved in, but now it seemed like he had become an unwilling part of it. He hadn't asked for any of this. He had simply acted out of kindness, trying to help someone in need. But now it felt like his life was being pulled in directions he didn't understand. I don't want any part of this, he said, his voice strained. I helped her because she was scared, but I don't want to get mixed up in whatever this is. I understand your hesitation, Agent Davis said gently, but the fact is you've already been involved. The military is tracking her movements and they think she might be in danger. The F-22 jet you saw earlier, that was part of a mission to keep tabs on her. We believe she's being targeted, and we need to know what you remember about your encounter with her. If you can help us find her, we can make sure she's safe. The farmer didn't know what to think. He hadn't signed up for any of this. He just wanted to go back to his quiet life on the farm where things made sense. But the woman, whoever she was, seemed to be caught in something much bigger than both of them, and now he was involved whether he liked it or not. I don't know what you want me to say, he replied, his voice thick with frustration. I helped her and that's all I know. She didn't say anything about being in trouble. She was just scared of the storm and I gave her a ride. Agent Davis paused before speaking again. We know you don't know everything, but we need you to keep your eyes open. If you see her again, or if you hear anything about her, we need you to contact us immediately. She's not just any ordinary person, and neither is this situation. You've already been involved, and we need to make sure you stay safe. The conversation ended abruptly, and the farmer sat in silence for a long time, trying to make sense of everything he had just heard. He kept telling himself that he had done nothing wrong, that he had only helped a woman in need. But now it felt like his simple act of kindness had dragged him into something much more dangerous. The next few days passed in a blur. The farmer went about his work, trying to focus on the tasks at hand, but his mind kept wandering. He kept wondering about the woman, about what had really been going on. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than he would ever know. And as much as he tried to push the thoughts aside, they kept coming back, haunting him in the quiet moments of the day. Then one evening, as the sun was setting and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, he saw something he couldn't ignore. A car appeared on the road in front of his farm, its headlights cutting through the dusk. The car slowed as it approached the gate, and the farmer's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why, but something about the car seemed familiar. He watched as it stopped in front of the gate, and then the driver's side door opened. To his surprise, it was her, the woman from the storm. She stepped out of the car, looking around cautiously as if making sure no one was watching. The farmer's mind raced. Why was she here? Was she in trouble again? He didn't know what to do. His first instinct was to walk up to her and ask her what was going on, but he hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should trust her. He wasn't even sure if he should be involved in any of this. But there she was, standing in front of his farm, and the questions were piling up in his mind. The farmer stood frozen in place, his heart thumping in his chest. The woman was standing just a few feet away, her eyes scanning the area around the farm as if she was looking for something, or someone. She didn't see him right away, and he took a hesitant step forward, trying to make sense of the situation. He had been expecting her, but now that she was actually here, everything felt different. The questions that had been swirling in his mind over the past few days flooded back in an instant. Why had she come here? What was really going on? And more importantly, was she in danger? For a moment, he simply watched her. She looked tired, worn down. Her clothes were drenched in the remnants of the storm, and her hair was disheveled. But there was something in her posture that made him realize she wasn't just a stranded motorist. This wasn't a simple case of bad luck. The woman had been through something that had left its mark on her. When she finally turned and saw him standing there, her eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't look scared. She didn't look like someone who was on the run. Instead, there was a flicker of recognition in her gaze, like she had been expecting him too. "I didn't expect you to be here," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again." The farmer took another step forward, his thoughts racing. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice coming out sharper than he intended. "You shouldn't be here. People are looking for you, aren't they?" She nodded slowly, her gaze shifting to the ground. "Yes," she said quietly. "But I didn't know where else to go. After everything that happened, I just needed a place to think. I didn't want to put anyone else in danger, but I didn't know what else to do." The farmer wasn't sure what to make of her words. He had already heard enough from the government agents to know that her situation was complicated. But standing here in front of him, she didn't seem like the person they had described. She wasn't some dangerous fugitive. She was just lost and scared. "I don't understand," he said, his voice softening as he took another step closer. "What happened? What are you running from?" For the first time, she looked up at him, meeting his gaze with a mixture of vulnerability and determination. "I never wanted any of this," she said, her voice trembling. "I never asked to be part of anything bigger than me. But sometimes life doesn't give you a choice." The farmer felt a pang of sympathy. He had lived a quiet life, far removed from the complexities of the world outside his farm. The problems of others were just that, other people's problems. But now, standing here with this woman, he realized how quickly things could change, how a single act of kindness could pull someone into a situation that wasn't their own making. "You don't have to explain," the farmer said, trying to ease the tension between them. "I helped you because I saw someone in need. That's all that matters." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not that simple. You don't know what's really going on. You don't know who's after me or why they want me so badly. If they find me, it won't just be me who's in danger." The farmer felt a cold chill crawl down his spine. He had suspected that there was more to her story than she was letting on, but hearing her say it aloud made the weight of the situation real. He had helped her because it was the right thing to do, but now he found himself in deeper than he ever imagined. This wasn't just about a stranded motorist anymore. This was about survival. "Who's after you?" he asked, his voice low. "I can't say," she replied quickly, her voice shaking. "If I do, they'll come after you too. They'll find a way to use you, to hurt you. I don't want that. I never wanted to drag anyone else into this." The farmer didn't know what to say. He had never been involved in anything like this before, and the fear in her voice made it clear that this was far from an ordinary situation. He wanted to help, but how could he? He wasn't a soldier or a spy. He was just a farmer. What could he do in the face of whatever was chasing her? "I don't know what I can do," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what's happening, but I can't just turn my back on you. You helped me when I needed it. Now I'll do what I can to help you." She gave him a sad smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You don't understand. This isn't something you can fix. It's bigger than both of us." The farmer was silent for a moment, trying to process everything she had said. There was so much he didn't understand, so much that didn't make sense. But there was one thing he knew for sure. He couldn't just walk away. He had already stepped into this world, whether he liked it or not, and now he had to find a way to make things right. "I don't know what's going to happen," he said finally, his voice steady, "but I'll help you. I'll figure this out. We'll figure this out." She looked at him with a mixture of relief and fear. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know how much this means to me." The farmer nodded, feeling the weight of the promise he had just made. He had no idea what he was getting himself into, but one thing was clear. His quiet life on the farm was over. Whatever was happening to the woman, whatever had dragged her into this dangerous world, was now part of his reality too. As the night settled around them, the farmer knew that the road ahead would not be easy. But for the first time since the storm, he felt like he was doing the right thing. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he was ready to face whatever came next, for her and for himself. The farmer sat at his kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. He wasn't sure how long he had been sitting there, lost in thought, but the weight of everything that had happened in the past few days felt heavier with every passing hour. The woman, her cryptic warnings, the phone calls from government agents, it was all too much to process. But there was something else now, something that had been slowly creeping into his mind ever since she had shown up at his farm. She wasn't just running from something. She wasn't just trying to hide. She was trying to survive. And for the first time, the farmer understood the true depth of what she had been through. He wasn't just helping her out of the storm anymore. He was helping her escape something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The morning light was just starting to break through the windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The farmer's gaze drifted to the door where he had last seen the woman standing. She had left before dawn, saying she needed to make contact with someone. He had told her to be careful, but she had insisted she couldn't stay for long. He couldn't help but worry. After everything they had discussed the night before, he knew that her situation was far from over. The phone call came just as he was finishing his breakfast. He glanced at the screen, recognizing the number. It was the same one that had contacted him earlier, the government agent, Agent Davis. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he was ready to hear more. But he knew he had no choice. The path he had stepped onto was already too far gone. "Hello?" he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Are you alone?" Agent Davis's voice came through the speaker, low and urgent. "Yes," the farmer replied, his heart rate picking up. "What's going on?" "I need you to listen carefully," Agent Davis said. "The situation has escalated. We've tracked the woman you helped, and she's in immediate danger. She's being pursued by a highly organized group. These people are dangerous, and they will stop at nothing to get what they want." The farmer's stomach sank. "What do you mean? What's going on? Who's after her?" "I can't give you all the details," Agent Davis replied. "But you need to understand that this isn't a simple matter. The woman you helped is not just a victim. She's part of something much bigger. And now you're involved too. The group we're dealing with doesn't care who they hurt to get what they want." The farmer's mind raced. He had suspected it for days, but now it was becoming clear. He had been pulled into something far beyond his control. He had no idea what kind of situation the woman was really in, but he was beginning to understand that his life was about to change forever. "What can I do?" he asked, his voice tight. "We need to get her to safety," Agent Davis said, "and we need you to help us do that. We've already mobilized, but we can't do this alone. We need your help to get her to a secure location. It's the only way we can keep her and you safe." The farmer felt a knot form in his stomach. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't trained for this kind of thing. He was just a man who worked the land, a man who had spent his life tending to his farm. But now everything was changing. He had no idea what he was getting into, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn his back on the woman. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice steady now, though his hands were trembling. "We believe she's on the move," Agent Davis replied. "We've lost track of her for the moment, but we're closing in. We think she's heading toward a safe house, but we need you to intercept her before they do. She trusts you. That's why you're the key to this." The farmer's mind was spinning. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. A safe house? A group pursuing her? This wasn't the kind of life he had ever imagined for himself. But as much as he wanted to walk away, he knew he couldn't. He had already promised to help, and now he had no choice but to follow through. "Okay," he said, his voice quieter now. "I'll help. But I need to know what I'm walking into." "I'll send you the coordinates," Agent Davis said. "Just get to her first, and whatever happens, stay alert. This is more dangerous than you think." The line went dead, and the farmer sat there for a moment, staring at the phone in his hand. He felt a strange sense of resolve building inside him. This wasn't just about helping someone anymore. This was about survival. And now he was part of something much bigger than himself. It wasn't long before he packed up his truck and set off, his mind focused on the task ahead. He had no idea where he was going, but he trusted the coordinates Agent Davis had sent him. The farm was behind him now, and the open road stretched out ahead, filled with uncertainty. The drive was long, and every mile felt heavier than the last. The landscape blurred as he drove, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the woman. His heart pounded in his chest as he thought about the danger she was in, the danger he was now in. He didn't know what kind of people were after her, but he knew they weren't going to stop, and he had to make sure she was safe. Hours passed, and as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the farmer found himself in a remote part of the countryside. The roads were winding, and the trees loomed like dark sentinels on either side. He glanced down at the map, his mind racing. He was close. He had to be. Suddenly, the truck's headlights illuminated a figure in the distance. It was her. She was standing by the side of the road, looking like she had been waiting for him. The farmer slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop in front of her. She didn't say anything at first, just got in the truck and slammed the door shut. Her eyes were wide with fear, and he could see the exhaustion written all over her face. She didn't look at him as she sat there, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "They're coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The farmer's heart raced as he gripped the wheel tighter. "We've got to get you to safety," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. She nodded, her eyes dark with worry. "I don't know how much time we have." The road ahead seemed endless, the trees pressing in on them from all sides. The farmer's mind was filled with questions, but he didn't dare ask. He had no answers, and he wasn't sure if he ever would. But one thing was certain. He wasn't turning back now. They were in this together, and he was going to do everything in his power to keep her safe. As the truck roared down the road, the farmer knew that whatever happened next, it was too late to turn back. There was no going back to his quiet life on the farm. There was only the road ahead and the unknown dangers that awaited them. The night was thick with tension as the truck sped through the darkened roads, the headlights cutting through the blackness ahead. The farmer's hands were tight on the wheel, his mind racing with uncertainty. The woman beside him was silent, her face drawn with a mix of exhaustion and fear. He could feel the weight of her fear hanging in the air, and he knew that whatever was chasing her was closing in fast. The road twisted and turned, and the landscape around them seemed to blur into an endless stretch of trees and hills. The silence between them was heavy, neither of them daring to speak, knowing that there was little they could say. The farmer's thoughts kept returning to the question of why he was involved in all of this. How had one simple act of kindness pulled him so deep into something he couldn't understand? "You're doing the right thing," she said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. Her eyes were staring straight ahead, but there was a faint tremor in her voice. "I know you didn't ask for this, but I'm grateful. I don't think I would have made it without you." The farmer glanced over at her. There was something in her voice, something raw, that made him feel like he was truly part of her struggle. He had helped her out of the storm, and now he was helping her survive something much bigger. But the truth was, he wasn't sure if either of them would make it through. "I just want to get you to safety," he said quietly, his voice steady but tinged with the reality of their situation. "I don't know who's after you or what this is all about, but I won't let you down." She gave him a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You already haven't, but you don't know what you're walking into." The farmer could feel the weight of her words hanging between them. It was like the calm before a storm, and he knew that things were only going to get more complicated from here. After what felt like hours, they finally arrived at a small, unmarked cabin hidden deep in the woods. It was a place he hadn't even known existed, tucked away in a secluded corner of the countryside. The road had been rough and the truck's engine had groaned under the strain, but they had made it. "Is this the place?" the farmer asked as he slowed the truck to a stop. The cabin seemed ordinary enough, but the secrecy surrounding it made his skin crawl. It was too quiet, too isolated. "This is it," she replied. She didn't sound relieved, though. There was still something in her voice that made it clear that they weren't safe yet. "I need to wait here for a while, lay low. But I'm not sure how long it'll be before they find me. And when they do, I won't be able to protect you." The farmer looked out at the cabin, his mind still spinning. He had come this far, but the fear in her voice made him uneasy. He wanted to believe that everything would be okay, but deep down he knew better. He could feel the weight of something dangerous hanging over them, something they couldn't outrun. "I'll stay with you," he said, his voice firm. "I won't leave until I know you're safe." The woman looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "You don't know what you're dealing with. They don't give up. They won't stop until they get what they want. And if you're involved, they'll come for you too. I don't want that for you." The farmer wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing, but in that moment he knew he couldn't walk away. He had already put himself in the middle of this, and he wasn't about to turn his back now. He had promised to help, and that's exactly what he intended to do. Together they made their way into the cabin, and the woman locked the door behind them. The cabin was small, with only a few pieces of furniture and a flickering oil lamp casting shadows on the walls. It smelled of damp wood and earth, a reminder that this place had been abandoned for a while. There was no sign of anyone else. It was just the two of them, isolated and alone. As they settled in, the woman seemed to relax a little, though the tension never fully left her. She kept glancing out the window as if expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. "Do you have a plan?" the farmer asked after a long silence. "What do we do now?" She hesitated before answering. "I need to make contact with someone. Someone who can help me get out of here. But I can't do that unless I know it's safe. I don't know how much time we have, but we need to be prepared for whatever comes next." The farmer nodded, though the uncertainty weighed heavily on him. He had no idea what he was preparing for, but he knew that things were moving fast. They couldn't afford to wait around and hope for the best. Whatever had been chasing her was closing in, and the clock was ticking. The next few hours passed slowly. The woman spent most of the time on the phone, speaking in hushed tones, trying to reach someone who could help. The farmer, meanwhile, kept watch over the cabin, his senses on high alert. He didn't know what to expect, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. As the sun began to set, the mood in the cabin grew even more tense. The woman had finished her calls, but there was no sign of the help she had been hoping for. She looked at the farmer, her face grim. "They're coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel it. They've tracked us here. We don't have much time." The farmer's heart skipped a beat. He stood up immediately, scanning the surroundings outside the cabin. The woods were eerily quiet, but he knew that silence was often a sign of something more dangerous lurking nearby. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice tight. He wanted to believe that this was just her paranoia talking, but the fear in her eyes told him otherwise. She nodded. "They're always one step ahead. We need to get out of here now." Without waiting for any further explanation, the farmer grabbed his keys and motioned for her to follow him. The two of them moved quickly, slipping out the back door of the cabin and into the dense woods. The night was cold and the wind cut through the trees, but they didn't slow down. They ran for what felt like hours, ducking behind trees and staying low to the ground. The sound of their footsteps was the only thing they could hear, but even that felt too loud in the quiet night. The farmer kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see someone following them, but there was nothing. Not yet. Eventually, they reached a small clearing and the woman stopped to catch her breath. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "We can't go any farther," she said, her voice shaky. "They'll find us if we keep running. We have to make a stand." The farmer knew that they couldn't run forever. He didn't know what kind of people were chasing her, but he knew one thing. They were relentless. They wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. And right now they wanted her. "All right," the farmer said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "We'll make our stand here. We'll fight back if we have to." The woman nodded, her eyes full of determination. "I'll do whatever it takes," and together they prepared for whatever was coming next. The night had fallen, and the world around them seemed to close in. There was no turning back now. They were in this fight together, and they would face whatever danger lay ahead. The night was quiet, too quiet. The woods stretched out around them like a dark sea, the trees whispering in the wind, and the only sound was the farmer's breath, quick and shallow, as he kept watch. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. They were close. He could sense it just like the woman had. They were being hunted, and no matter how much time they had spent hiding, he knew it wasn't going to be long before they were found. The woman, too, was on edge. She stood beside him, her eyes darting through the trees, constantly scanning for any movement. She hadn't spoken much since they'd left the cabin, but the fear in her posture was enough to tell the farmer just how close they were to danger. "They're coming," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would alert the danger that was creeping closer. "I can feel it." The farmer didn't doubt her. He'd seen enough to know that whatever was chasing her wasn't something ordinary. The silence in the woods felt oppressive now, and every creak of a branch or rustle of leaves felt like the first sign of something that wasn't human. His eyes flicked from tree to tree, his heart hammering in his chest. He had never been in a situation like this before. He had lived his life working the land, tending to animals and minding his own business. But now here he was in the middle of a forest, trying to protect a woman who was running from something dangerous, something bigger than anything he had ever known. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves and making the branches sway, casting long shadows on the ground. The woman's hand tightened on his arm and he turned to look at her. She was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but there was also something else in her expression: determination. She wasn't just running from something. She was ready to fight, and that made him realize that they weren't just being hunted. They were being cornered. "They're not far behind," she whispered, taking a step back and pulling the farmer with her. "We need to move. If we stay here, they'll find us." Without another word, they began to move deeper into the woods, pushing through the thick underbrush. The farmer's mind was racing, trying to come up with a plan, but the truth was he had no idea how they were going to get out of this. They were outnumbered, and whoever was after them had resources he couldn't even imagine. He didn't have a weapon, didn't have any kind of backup. All he had was his determination to get this woman to safety, and that didn't feel like nearly enough. They pushed on, their pace quickening, but the deeper they went, the harder it became to see. The trees grew denser, the darkness closing in on them. The wind picked up again, howling through the branches, and the farmer could hear the distant sound of something breaking through the underbrush. It wasn't the wind this time. It was the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate. "They're here," the woman said, her voice tight with fear. "They've found us." The farmer's heart skipped a beat. There was no more running now. They were too close. He had no choice but to turn and face whatever was coming for them. "Stay behind me," he said, though he wasn't sure if that was even going to be enough. He had never been in a fight before, never had to protect someone like this. But there was no turning back now. He turned to face the direction of the footsteps, straining his ears to hear anything else. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. He could see shapes moving through the trees now, shadowy figures that moved with purpose, their footsteps steady and synchronized. "Get ready," the woman said, her voice low, filled with urgency. "They won't hesitate to hurt us." The farmer's breath caught in his throat, but he didn't move. He kept his eyes locked on the shapes, trying to figure out how many there were, how many they were up against. The figures came into focus, and the farmer's heart sank. There were at least 4 of them, each one wearing dark clothing that blended with the shadows, their faces obscured by masks. "They're armed," the woman murmured, barely audible. "We need to get out of here now," but there was no more running. They were surrounded. The first figure stepped forward, raising a hand in a signal to the others. The farmer's pulse quickened, and he felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. They had to make a move, or they were done for. "Get down," the woman shouted, pushing the farmer to the ground just as the first shot rang out. It wasn't a bullet, but a dart, sharp and quick, hitting the tree next to them with a soft thud. The farmer's eyes widened in shock. "What the hell?" he gasped, turning to the woman for an explanation. "They're using tranquilizers," she said, her voice tight with fear. "They want us alive. For now." Before the farmer could say anything, the woman pulled him to his feet, dragging him deeper into the woods. They couldn't outrun them, but they could make them work for it. The woman's movements were quick, precise, and the farmer followed her, trusting her instincts. They moved like shadows, darting between trees and ducking behind rocks. The sound of footsteps behind them grew louder, but the farmer could hear something else now. Voices. Low, gruff voices. The hunters were communicating, trying to find their next move. "Keep moving," the woman urged. "We need to get to the river." The river? The farmer didn't understand, but he didn't ask. He just followed, trusting that whatever plan she had, it was their best chance. They moved swiftly, the sounds of their pursuers still close behind. The farmer could feel the sweat on his brow, the adrenaline pumping through his veins. His muscles were starting to burn from the effort, but there was no stopping now. He had to keep going. For her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the riverbank. The woman immediately began to work, pulling a small raft from behind a large rock. The farmer's mind was reeling. How had she known this place was here? How had she prepared for this? "We can't stop here," he said, his voice strained. "They'll catch up to us." "We'll make it," she said, her voice firm as she shoved the raft into the water. "We have to." They climbed into the raft, the woman taking the oars. The river was fast-moving, and the water churned around them as they floated away from the shore, but the farmer couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't out of danger yet. Behind them, the sounds of their pursuers grew more distant, but that didn't mean they were safe. The woman rowed steadily, her gaze fixed ahead. The farmer kept watch behind them, eyes scanning the trees, waiting for any sign of movement. After a few minutes, the woman stopped rowing, her eyes narrowing as she stared ahead. "They'll follow us down the river," she said, her voice low. "We need to lose them." "How?" the farmer asked. "We can't outrun them in this thing.